I'm Brian Jawalka with Rackspace. I'm an enterprise architect in our advisory services group. I'm not really a podium speaker, so I might kind of walk back and forth up here across this tiny stage. But at least it keeps me from feeling like I'm a college professor. So really my topic today was really to talk about gaining a competitive advantage for your e-commerce site, right? How does infrastructure, how does technology relate to an advantage over your competition? All right, first off, how many of you are Rackspace customers or partners? It's quite a few, right? So thank you. Thank you for your business. So to give you a little background on Rackspace, right? The theme of Imagine, really, what's your story, right? Rackspace, we were founded in 1998. We are a pure play hosting provider. We do managed hosting and cloud computing. We don't do any sort of outsourcing. We don't do kind of take over your applications. All we do is hosting. This last year, we were named the leader in Gartner's Magic Quadrant. We've always been in the leaders quadrant, but now we are clearly in the top right there. We have 8 global data centers. There's roughly 4,000 employees like me. We call ourselves Rackers. So those are spread across all different disciplines, from support operations to sales to engineering to data center operations. We have a few specialty groups. The part that, like the group that I'm made up of is advisory services. My whole goal and objective meeting with customers and prospects and at industry events is really to challenge the thinking methodology, to get out there and be disruptive in the thought process, not necessarily to say that you're going to always choose that bleeding edge or disruptive thought, but just to kind of get people thinking outside the box. Right, we have a cloud builders group that helps customers build their own cloud platform based on OpenStack, which I'll talk about a little bit briefly. Professional services, our sales engineering team, and we have a big practice around SharePoint. Within our support practice, we have industry experts around all manners of storage, networking, servers, software. You can imagine that over the last 14 years, we've built quite a bench of experience. So we use all that to build our expertise in the internet space, right? We live and breathe and die by the internet, and that's why e-commerce is such a strong part of what we're delivering for our clients. And just quickly to give you a sense of scale, here you'll see we're managing roughly 80,000 servers. There was an infographic I think it was on Wired last year sometime, and Rackspace was listed as one of the top 10 server companies that has servers in the world. Obviously Google was at the top, but it was a big milestone just to meet that. And so really what makes Rackspace different is we consider ourselves a service organization, right? Fanatical Support is all we do. What we want to deliver is a world-class service experience for your technology. And so there is a seamless portfolio, a broad portfolio of technology underneath of that, but at the end of the day, it's our mission to deliver service, not necessarily the newest, latest, greatest server or technology platform. And we're committed to continuing to build our business on open technologies. Right? Our cloud platform is based on OpenStack, and I think that's why you see such a strong alignment between Rackspace and Magento and eCommerce, is that commitment to openness. We want to make sure that our customers aren't tied in, aren't locked into anything. If you want to get up and move to another provider, then we want to help you with that process. We don't want to hinder you by the technology that we've put in place and the systems and the tools and the processes that we're using. We want it to be seamless. At the end of the day, if we're holding you captive because you're locked into a particular platform, then we've failed at that mission. And so when you look back at the Rackspace Magento story, right? Magento's been a Rackspace partner since 2007. This all started with one of our sales reps just sending an outbound email saying, hey, we have the Rackspace partner program. And lo and behold, Roy got that email and responded and said, I'm getting ready to launch a software platform. We need some help. We need some experience around internet and e-commerce and somebody to help shepherd us through this process. And our partnership began. Our best relationships are with partners, are through partnerships, not with a buy, sell, manage a contract type of relationship. And so that started in 2007. Rackspace became a Magento hosting partner in 2009. I think that's when the hosting partner became available. Before then, it was loose alignment, referral based. And then we are the hosting partner for eCommerce and Magento Go. So we're running those platforms. eCommerce and Rackspace are tied very closely together with our OpenStack initiatives. And I'll touch briefly on OpenStack, which what Rackspace has done is we have open sourced our cloud computing platform so that any company, big or small, a competitor, a collaborator, an enterprise organization can take our software and deploy it and run the same cloud platform that Rackspace runs. And so that's really where we have a strategic alignment between our businesses, between Rackspace and eCommerce. And so now when we take a look back and we think about kind of what's happening in the industry, if you look at all of the press and the analyst comments, that we see that consumers are placing fewer orders but larger orders. They're not doing the 1 and 2 transactions. They're still doing the 1 and 2 transactions, but they're much, much larger volume. So that checkout, that process, that customer really relates to more revenue, right? And so any sort of hindrance or any benefit that you can put to enable that customer is going to lead to direct higher conversions and higher revenue. And then if you look at that, people are spending more on ads. So if this statistic says ad spending is up 22%, imagine that if your cost of sales is now up by a fifth, right? Then that customer that comes to your site is now that much more valuable to you. So you want to make sure that as you're supporting their experience, that you're providing a smooth experience, and you want to make sure that while you have them, you can try and capitalize on every interaction. And then at the end of last year, Forrester announced that e-retail spending will increase by 62% in the next 4 years. Right? Now, that's a significant increase, because 62% on a big number is a really big number. Right? So how do we make sure that we're all prepared to handle that increase in traffic? I think that if I look back at kind of what my parents do, my dad's still afraid to buy half of his things online. Right? Doesn't want to pay his bills online. But as those barriers are torn down, as people get more and more comfortable doing things online and spending more and more money online, then I think that we have to be ready to handle that next phase of adoption. Right? Look at I've worked with some very high-end brands that sell to a very small number of clients, and historically they've always had just brand sites. You go to there and you look and you say, oh, I sell this high-end piece of jewelry, or I sell this these fashion items, and historically they've had no interest in selling online. And now their consumers are changing, and so instead of having to go to a boutique store or go to Neiman Marcus and buy something, those high-end brands are now selling things online, which they would have never considered 3, 4, or 5 years ago. And so what we want to think about is how does the decisions we make with technology impact our business and provide an advantage over your competition. Now to start this thought process, right, we have to think about what makes us different. The first thing that's going to make us different, obviously, is what we're selling. I wish that I was in a place in the world where I was selling a product that no one else had, or no one else had anything close to, because then I could just sit at home and collect money in the mailbox. And I'm sure many of us would love that opportunity. But in order to get customers to come into our site, to know that we exist, to know where my business is, you have to market and sell your products, right? You have to put some sort of advertising online, whether it's word of mouth, or maybe for smaller companies it's direct mail in their local communities. But if you think back of spending 22% more on online advertising, spending more to get customers in, you want to make sure that when you're buying and selling, or when you're marketing to those customers, that you're setting yourselves up so that they have a smooth experience, so that when they're going to the site, you're not hindering them in any way, that they're not having to sit there and say, man, why is this taking so long? What's happening? Why is this not going as smoothly as I would have hoped? Because a recent study showed that 57% of online consumers will abandon a site after waiting 3 seconds for a page to load. Right? I would count myself probably in that category of consumers that would leave, because I'm so attached to things occurring very quickly. And so when a site's slow and it's slow to respond, then I get frustrated and I say, well, I'll just find it somewhere else. Where am I going to go? I'm going to go to Amazon. Or I'm going to go, I'm just going to throw it in Google and see what Google checkout tells me. And I'm going to look for that item somewhere else. But the interesting thing is how these stats play out. Because of those 57%, 80% of them will not return back to the site. Right? So you've just lost 80% of those people that were having a slow experience. And of those, nearly half will go on to tell people that they've had a bad experience. Now, are any of you familiar with the Net Promoter Score? It asks one simple question: would you refer this business to a friend or colleague? Maybe you've taken that survey. If you're Rackspace customers, you've surely taken the survey. But it's something that Fred Reichheld was the creator of the Net Promoter Score. He has a book called The Ultimate Question. And Rackspace really lives and dies by the Net Promoter system. Because at the end of the day, if you're happy enough and satisfied enough with what we're delivering, then you're going to recommend us to a friend or colleague. And that's the same thing that's happening here, but on the opposite end of the spectrum. Those people are leaving because they're negative, and they feel like that experience was so negative that they're going to go tell their friends that they had a bad experience. And so just by making sure that they have a smooth experience and they don't have any issues with your application means that you're going to lead them to a positive experience and take away the detractors and start adding promoters to drive more referral business to your site. There's an interesting statistics I found from Strange Loop. They're a CDN network out of Canada. And I encourage you to go look at all of their infographics because they have quite a bit of data that's kind of encouraging. But if you think of this 1 second delay in load time, 7% loss of conversions, 11% fewer page views, and a 16% decrease in customer satisfaction. Now they've extrapolated that down to do some math. And so roughly if your site does $100,000 a day, you lose $2.5 million in sales. Now, not all of us are doing $100,000 a day in online transactions, but if you do the quick math, it's roughly 25 days of transactions lost in a year by having a 1 second slower page load time. That's a big impact, right? And let's just say that they're padding the numbers because they want the analyst firm that did all this research wants it to look good. But even if I cut that in half, I'm still talking about 2 weeks of lost revenue. That's essentially, you could be perfect all other days of the year and just be down for 2 weeks. Now, I don't think that that's acceptable to most of us. I know it's not acceptable at Rackspace in my job, because if I was running infrastructure that was down for 2 weeks, I would no longer be running infrastructure. And thankfully, that's no longer my job requirement. But think about that. How does a 1 second page load time, right? If you're 1 second faster than your competition, think of that. You might be able to capitalize on their loss. If you're able to remove one page from the checkout experience, or if you're able to streamline their process to completing a transaction, then you're now able to complete more transactions than your competition. And so what is it that you start to focus on? Right? The first thing that I think you should focus on is reliability, making sure that you're up and available. Then I think you focus on performance and scalability, because if you're not online, it doesn't matter whether you have all the performance in the world. So step 1 is being online, step 2 is serving the content. And then step 3 is who is there to support it. What happens if you have a problem? What happens in the middle of the night? Do you have the staff to support it? Do you have a partner that's doing the application work? Do you have a service provider that's doing the work for you? And so making sure that you have that kind of clear escalation path. And so when we start thinking about reliability, the first thing you have to know is what's happening. What monitoring data do you have in place? Do you know what's happening with your site? What has your historic uptime been? Right? Do you have that data? Can you look at that data and understand what your goals should be? What's at risk for failure? Right? I think this is one thing that many organizations don't take a clear look at until it's too late. Because they start thinking about, oh, well, my service provider is giving me a great data center, I'm going to be online all the time, but they're not thinking about, well, I have my applications spread out, and let's say for Magento, maybe I have one web server and one database server. Well, each component is now at risk, right? And so you want to make sure that you understand what those risks are and how you're going to mitigate those risks. And then what is your plan to remediate those risks? So if something fails, what's the plan? And are you prepared to take action on that plan? It's similar with scalability, right? Reliability, scalability, they go hand in hand. All the abilities, right? And so you want to think about how much capacity do you have. Where is your breaking point? Have you hit the breaking point before? Do you know where the breaking point is? What happens on Black Friday? What happens on Cyber Monday? What happens if you send out an amazing viral marketing campaign, right? Think of what happened to did anybody see the Dollar Shave Club guys? Anybody, they had this video of a guy basically that, I guess he's the Dollar Shave Club salesman, right? And it was a hilarious video of him walking through their warehouse talking about how they're gonna sell razors for $1 a month, something like that. Well, the video was so viral and went crazy on YouTube that you couldn't get to their site anymore. So they launched a video so that you would go sign up. But everybody was enjoying the video but could never sign up. And at that point, they just all abandoned. And so they lost who knows how many hundreds of thousands of signups because their infrastructure wasn't able to handle that campaign. Now, the video was amazing, and I doubt that they thought that it was going to be hilarious and hit everybody's inbox, but those are the sort of things you have to think about and be prepared for, or at least know where the breaking point is. Half of the battle is just knowing where things break. And so when you need more capacity, how much flexibility do you have? Do you have something standby? Can you use a development or test environment to supplement capacity for a short term? Do you have a provider that can turn something on fast for you? Maybe you have a hybrid cloud option, right? This is something that is relatively new in the industry, new in the marketplace that, especially around e-commerce, making sure that you have the right controls in place, making sure you have the right technology in place, and the enabling technologies to support this sort of capability. So we think about what's the impact, right? If you're down for an hour on a slow day for you, what does that equate to in terms of lost transactions, lost revenue? And then do the calculations on a busy day. If it's the best day of the year, where you have the most transactions, what's the impact to you? Are you going to lose $100, $1,000, $100,000, $1 million, right? I think that I talk to a lot of clients and they say, well, if I'm down for some period of time, it's going to result in I'm losing $1 million a minute. Some customers are. Other customers aren't, right? And I think it's just a matter of, if you understand that, you know what the risk is, you know what you're going to invest in, because it really tells you whether the extra investment is worth it. Maybe your performance, maybe the amount of customers that you have that come to your site, maybe it's a boutique type of product, maybe performance-wise you need one server, but maybe you're selling a product that has high revenue attached to it, or is attached to a global brand. Right? The one thing when you run the numbers, you have to think about what your brand impact is too. Right? If I'm selling shoes and my website's down, you may not think that I'm a reliable enough company to invest in, to buy their products from, because you don't know if they're going to be there tomorrow. And so, same thing, is the extra investment worth it? What's my brand impact? What's this going to do to my marketing people? What's it going to do to the feedback that I'm going to get on Twitter? Right? I mean, look at the Twitter board that's out there. So just examples. And then, are there any trade-offs? Is it acceptable for your performance to be cut in half if you have some sort of outage? If you know that is going to be, that your remediation plan says you're going to be fixed in an hour, can you live with an hour of slow performance? I think these are questions that most organizations that I go out and speak to, they haven't necessarily thought through all the details. And these are all business questions that impact technology, right? Because we can give you all the technology in the world. I can put it in data centers globally. I can make traffic go to them all at the same time. But if I don't have the business drivers to justify that investment, then there's no point in ever standing up that technology. I'm a tech guy, right? I want to have all the bells and whistles. But if I go to a marketing business, or I go to one of my customers and I say, you should buy all the bells and whistles, they're going to want us to justify it. And you can't justify it unless you have the business impact behind it. And so I'm going to take a turn and go being a tech guy, right? What does this look like from a technology standpoint? What happens on the technology front? So at the most simple infrastructure, right? One firewall, one server. Right? We'll assume you're running the whole platform on one server. This is the starting point for many small customers. Right? Many people just trying to launch their platform. Now, as they need performance, then we might add a database server. Right? You're going to now have more performance, separation of duties. You can now move towards PCI compliance. As I'm starting to serve up more clients, I need more performance. So I'm going to add a load balancer. I'm going to start sending traffic across multiple web servers. But now that I've got multiple web servers, I say, well, I'm fault tolerant at the web server layer, but I still have that one database server that might cause problems. That's a risk point for me because that's where all my data lives. So then you can start doing database clustering, right? You could do MySQL active passive, right? You do clustering with Red Hat Cluster Suite. You could do master slave. Any number of technologies to make your database fault tolerant. And now this may be acceptable, right? Because the failure rate of your network equipment, firewalls, load balancers, maybe any switching that's in here, tends to be much, much less than that of any servers, right? If so, when customers are asking me about making trade-offs, do I put redundancy in at my server layer or my network layer because I can only afford one or the other, this is the architecture that I would suggest first and foremost, every time, hands down. Because a server is going to fail far more often than a network device. Just the facts of parts moving, configuration changes, server operating systems aren't perfect, right? There's a lot more risk at the server layer. But when we want to get to where there's no single points of failure, then I can build in redundant network equipment, right? And this would be a complete fault-tolerant solution. I have no single points of failure here. I have redundant components at each tier, and I'm sure that I can live up to the expectations that a business has set forth for me from a reliability standpoint. Now, when you start thinking about how do I add more performance, and maybe I'm going to burst and use cloud servers. I'm going to use Rackspace has a product called Rack Connect, and that allows us to connect cloud infrastructure into physical infrastructure. Now, I wouldn't necessarily say this may not be a solution for all the time, but it's an insurance policy, right? I worked with somebody in the Fortune 10, right? And they were looking at redoing their e-commerce platform, and their internal security controls would not allow them to use cloud computing because they wouldn't be able to go and touch and feel and know exactly where that infrastructure lives. But the trade-off was, okay, we can't use cloud computing all the time, but what happens if there's a big problem? What happens if I really need that performance? What happens if we start selling TVs for $10, right? Then they're already connected in the cloud. They already have all their deployment mechanisms in place, and they can go ahead and start using cloud servers for a short period of time to handle that extra capacity to burst that traffic. And so those are just things for you to think about and how you might leverage more technology. But when we look at that technology, we have to think about who's going to support this, right? Now, these are actual Rackers. This is Melissa and David. They run our implementation team. This is Jeff DeVerter. He leads our SharePoint group, right? But who are those individuals that are going to be there that are going to take ownership, right? To treat your problem as their problem? Is that somebody on your staff? Is that somebody that's a partner? Is that a service provider? Just understanding how you're going to mitigate some sort of support-related issue, a software issue, a hardware issue, an operating system, or a backup problem, right? Who's going to be there for you, right? And so you want to make sure that whoever you have has the industry expertise, somebody that knows the look and feel and how the internet works. I was going to say the look and feel of cotton, but that doesn't relate here. But, just so that you're not having to start from scratch when you talk to them, right? Somebody that at least understands what an e-commerce site is, understands the controls that need to be put in place, understands what the impact is because you're generating revenue from this, right? Somebody that you feel like is an extension of your organization, that you feel like is part of the team, because ultimately, if your hair's on fire because you're not able to complete transactions and your customers are having issues, then you want the person on the other end of the phone or the person on the other side of the table to really feel like it's their problem too. And that's one thing that I've taken great pride in my time at Rackspace. I've been at Rackspace almost 8 years. And every customer that I work with, I feel like it's their problem is my problem. And all of my peers feel the same way. And that's really what makes our relationships with clients different and unique. But it all boils down to trust, right? If you don't trust the person on the other end, if you don't have that level of trust that they have the competency to get it right, that they're going to take ownership of it, that they feel like this is a problem for you is a problem for them, then maybe it's not the right partner. Right? I like to think that Rackspace can be that trustworthy partner for you at all scenarios, but the realistic answer is we're not the right partner for every organization and every customer. And that's one of our sales teams will go for the no early on, right? But I think that in most cases, for web-enabled applications, anything that's delivered through a browser, whether it's e-commerce or software as a service or a gaming company, right? That we're that vendor and we're there to help and be that partner. You know, I've worked with a big gaming company for several years, and they had an issue that they were using another provider to run a lot of their game servers. And this isn't a regular example of things we do for customers, but it just kind of stars aligned. And they said, hey, we're having an issue. The other provider's down. They can't fix it. We don't have enough capacity. And they came to us, and we were able to leverage servers that we were using for cloud. And we got them several hundred servers online over a weekend so that their business could continue to operate. It would reduce brand impact, and they were able to make their customers satisfied. Like those sort of things that we're willing to take heroic steps for our customers. And customers big and small, right? That's a big customer example. But all customers big and small, that's really what, I think what sets a true partnership apart from a service provider, customer type of relationship. And so the things I want you to think about, right, as part of your next steps, know where your business runs. Do you know where your applications are running today? Do you have an understanding of what your risks are, how things might be impacted? What are your SLAs? Have you defined SLAs inside the organization? Do you have SLAs to business units? Do you have SLAs to customers you might be providing services to? What are your SLAs from your service provider? And are those SLAs enough, right? Does it make sense? If there is something that causes you to look at those SLAs, are you confident that whichever organization is responsible for fixing it is capable of fixing it within those timeframes? Because if you have an SLA, but it can never, let's say your SLA is an hour, but realistically it can only be fixed in 6 hours, then what good is a 1 hour SLA? Yes, so you might get some money back, or yes, it might cause an escalation up the flagpole, but it's still going to take you 6 hours, so you want to not rely on that and not have to think about it. And so once you've gone through that, define objectives that are reasonable to achieve, right? I think this is one thing that that is an interesting position for many customers that I work with, because a lot of organizations come to us and say, I can have no downtime, none whatsoever. Excuse me. And then when you start thinking about it and you say, okay, well, are you willing to make the investment not only in technology, but in development time and people and systems to actually make that happen? And a lot of times, once they start considering the amount of work and the amount of investment that it would have to go into it, they say, okay, well, maybe 100% isn't realistic. Then I want 5 nines. Okay, well, the closer and closer you get to zero, the amount of investment for people, processes, tools, that investment increases exponentially. Right? So you have to find the sweet spot for your business. And really, what are your options, right? What trade-offs can you make? What changes can you put in place? Are you running the right version of software? Do you have the right infrastructure to support it? Do you have monitoring tools that make you feel comfortable? Just kind of understanding all of the options and working with somebody that, whether they're a partner, a colleague, somebody you talk to on LinkedIn, maybe it's a LinkedIn community, right? Those are very active for us at Rackspace these days. But just being able to bounce ideas off people and say, I'm looking at making these 2 decisions. Help me understand the pros and cons of each. Now, just so that you can make an informed decision and know what option is best for your business. And so with that, I'd like to open up to Q&A.